Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The department store had racks of colorful clothing and shiny displays vying for attention. Soft pop music drifted through hidden speakers, nearly drowned out by the cacophony of voices and rustling bags. Amidst it all, Jordan felt a thrill of excitement as he browsed the women's section, fingertips trailing over silky blouses and flowing skirts. He'd waited weeks for this shopping trip, carefully planning it for a time when he was certain to avoid running into anyone he knew. The delicate fabrics felt magical against his skin, so different from the harsh denim and cotton of his everyday attire. A flash of movement caught his eye, and he glanced up, breath catching in his throat. No, it couldn't be. But there was no mistaking that familiar wave of chestnut hair, the purposeful stride. Carla, his cousin, here, now. Panic seized him as he watched her weave between the clothing racks, steadily making her way closer. He clutched the pile of clothes in his arms, knuckles white. If she saw him here, surrounded by women's clothing, how could he possibly explain? The questions, the judgment, the pity in her eyes. It was too much to bear. Without conscious thought, Jordan's feet carried him swiftly towards the changing rooms. He darted inside the nearest empty stall, yanking the curtain closed behind him with trembling hands. Pressed against the wall, he struggled to calm his racing heart. "It's fine," he whispered to himself. "She didn't see you. Just wait it out." Precious seconds ticked by as Jordan strained his ears, listening for any sign that Carla had moved on. But the soft murmur of her voice remained frustratingly close, punctuated by the periodic swish of hangers sliding along metal racks. Come on, he muttered, willing her to leave. After what felt like an eternity, Jordan risked peeking out from behind the curtain. His heart sank. There was Carla, casually browsing a nearby display of sweaters, showing no signs of leaving anytime soon. With a quiet groan of frustration, Jordan retreated back into the changing room. He eyed the pile of clothes in his arms, considering his options. There was no telling how long Carla might linger, and the longer he hid, the more suspicious it would look if she happened to spot him skulking out of the women's changing area. A crazy idea began to form. What if he tried on the clothes? He could transform himself, become someone else entirely. Someone Carla would never recognize, even if she looked right at him. The thought sent a shiver of excitement down his spine, chasing away some of the lingering fear. He'd dreamed of fully embracing this side of himself for so long, and now, ironically, his cousin's unexpected appearance had created the perfect opportunity. Taking a deep breath, Jordan set down his armful of clothes and began to undress. He carefully folded his jeans and button-down shirt, setting them aside. Clad only in his underwear, he surveyed the selection of garments before him. He started with a pair of sheer black tights, relishing the sensation as he slowly rolled them up his legs. The delicate material clung to his skin like a second layer, accentuating the curve of his calves. Next came a flouncy black skirt with delicate white polka dots. The fabric swished around his thighs as he fastened the side zipper, the hem falling just above his knees. Jordan ran his hands over the material, marveling at how it felt against his newly smooth legs. For a top, he chose a silky emerald green blouse with ruffled cap sleeves. The fabric whispered against his skin as he slipped it on, fumbling slightly with the small pearlescent buttons. The neckline dipped low, exposing his collarbone and a hint of chest. Jordan turned to examine his reflection in the full-length mirror. The stranger staring back at him took his breath away. Gone was the awkward, self-conscious man. In his place stood someone graceful, feminine, beautiful. But the transformation wasn't complete. Jordan reached for a pair of nude kitten heels, wobbling slightly as he stepped into them. The extra height elongated his legs, creating a more elegant line from ankle to hip. Digging through his pile of accessories, he found a long string of faux pearls. He draped them around his neck, the cool beads a soothing weight against his chest. Dangling silver earrings and a stack of thin bangles completed the look. Jordan's hands shook slightly as he applied a coat of deep red lipstick, carefully blotting his lips together. A swipe of mascara made his lashes long and dark, drawing attention to his hazel eyes. He fluffed his shaggy brown hair, arranging it to frame his face in a softer style. Taking a step back, Jordan drank in the full effect. The woman in the mirror exuded confidence and poise. Carla would never recognize him like this. A giddy laugh bubbled up in his chest. He'd done it. He'd finally become the person he'd always longed to be. Gathering his courage, Jordan took a deep breath and pushed aside the changing room curtain. He stepped out on slightly unsteady legs, hands smoothing down the front of his skirt. To his relief, Carla was nowhere in sight. He made his way through the clothing racks, reveling in the swish of fabric around his legs and the click of heels against tile. Other shoppers barely spared him a glance. To them, he was just another woman browsing the store. The realization was intoxicating. Jordan allowed himself to relax, losing track of time as he admired colorful dresses and tried on jangly bracelets. He was so caught up in the experience that he almost forgot why he'd transformed himself in the first place, until a familiar voice jolted him back to reality. "Ooh, that blouse would look great on you!" He whirled around to find Carla standing just a few feet away, smiling brightly. Jordan's heart leapt into his throat. This was the moment of truth. "The color really brings out your eyes," Carla continued, gesturing to the silky green fabric. Jordan cleared his throat, pitching his voice higher as he responded. "Oh, thank you. I wasn't sure about it at first, but I think you're right." Carla nodded approvingly. "Definitely. You should get it. Oh, and those shoes are adorable too." "You're so sweet," Jordan replied, hardly daring to breathe. "I just love this store, don't you? So many great options." "Absolutely," Carla agreed. "I always find the best stuff here. Oh, have you checked out their new line of summer dresses? They're to die for." And just like that, Jordan found himself engaged in casual small talk with his cousin, who had no idea she was speaking to her male relative. The surreal nature of the situation threatened to overwhelm him, but he clung to his feminine persona like a lifeline. "I'll have to take a look," he said. "Always on the hunt for the perfect sundress, you know?" Carla laughed. "Aren't we all? Well, I won't keep you. Happy shopping." With a friendly wave, she moved off towards another section of the store. Jordan sagged against a nearby rack, legs trembling with relief. He'd done it. He'd fooled her completely. But the elation was short-lived as reality came crashing back. What now? He couldn't very well change back into his regular clothes with Carla still in the store. And even if he could, the thought of shedding this magical persona made his chest ache with loss. No, there was only one option. Heart pounding, Jordan made his way to the checkout counter. He'd have to leave wearing exactly what he had on. "Find everything okay?" the cashier asked cheerfully as she began scanning tags. Jordan nodded, struggling to keep his voice steady. Yes, thank you. Just, wearing my purchases out today. If the woman found this odd, she didn't show it. No problem at all. That'll be $247.83. Hands shaking, Jordan pulled out his wallet and handed over his credit card. He signed the receipt with a loopy, feminine scrawl that bore no resemblance to his usual signature. "Have a great day," the cashier called as Jordan gathered his bags, doing his best to appear calm and collected. He made his way towards the exit, pulse thundering in his ears. Just a few more steps and he'd be free. He was so focused on the doors ahead that he nearly collided with someone. "Oh, excuse me!" Jordan's stomach dropped as he found himself face to face with Carla once more. She smiled apologetically, stepping aside to let him pass. "No worries," Jordan managed to say. "My fault entirely." He hurried past, praying she wouldn't notice anything amiss. The automatic doors slid open, and he stepped out into the warm afternoon sun, hardly daring to believe he'd actually made it. The parking lot stretched before him, a sea of glinting metal and asphalt. Jordan realized with a start that he had no idea where he'd parked his car. He'd been so excited arriving at the store that he'd barely paid attention. Panic threatened to overwhelm him once more. What if someone recognized him? What if Carla came out and saw him wandering aimlessly? He forced himself to take a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. He was a confident woman out for a day of shopping, nothing more. With deliberate steps, Jordan began to make his way across the lot. The click of his heels against the pavement steadied him, a rhythmic reminder of his transformation. He held his head high, shopping bags swinging jauntily at his side. Row after row of vehicles passed by as Jordan searched for his familiar sedan. The sun beat down, causing sweat to bead along his hairline. He resisted the urge to wipe it away, not wanting to smudge his carefully applied makeup. Just when he was considering giving up and calling a cab, Jordan spotted his car tucked away in a far corner of the lot. Relief washed over him as he quickened his pace, fumbling in his purse for the keys. He'd just reached the driver's side door when a voice called out behind him. "Hey! You dropped this!" Jordan turned to see Carla jogging towards him, waving a small object. His heart leapt into his throat as he realized it was his wallet. It must have fallen out when he'd taken out his keys. "Oh gosh, thank you so much," he said, willing his voice not to shake. "I don't know what I would have done without it." Carla smiled as she handed over the wallet. "No problem at all. Us girls have to look out for each other, right?" Jordan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He clutched the wallet to his chest, hyper-aware of how close Carla was standing. If she looked closely, would she see through his disguise? But Carla just gave a little wave. "Well, have a great rest of your day." "You too," Jordan managed. "Thanks again." He watched as Carla made her way back across the parking lot, only allowing himself to relax once she'd disappeared from view. With trembling hands, he unlocked the car and slid into the driver's seat. For a long moment, Jordan simply sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel. The events of the past hour felt like a dream. Had he really done it? Had he truly walked out of the store dressed as a woman, fooling even his own cousin? Slowly, a grin spread across his face. He had. He'd done the unthinkable, embraced a part of himself he'd kept hidden for so long. And it had been exhilarating. Jordan started the car, excitement bubbling up inside him. He didn't know what the future held or how he'd navigate this newfound freedom, But for now, he was content to simply enjoy the feeling of being truly himself for the first time in his life. As he pulled out of the parking lot, the sun warm on his face and the breeze ruffling his hair, Jordan felt a sense of possibility he'd never known before. The road stretched out before him, full of promise and adventure, and he couldn't wait to see where it might lead. The drive home was a blur of conflicting emotions. Elation warred with anxiety as Jordan replayed the afternoon's events in his mind. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. The realization hit him anew with each passing mile, sending fresh waves of adrenaline coursing through his body. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, the unfamiliar press of bangles against his wrists, a constant reminder of his transformation. The skirt bunched around his thighs as he worked the pedals, the silky material a stark contrast to his usual jeans. Jordan found himself hyper-aware of every sensation. The brush of the blouse against his skin, the gentle sway of the pearl necklace, the pinch of the heels on his feet. It was overwhelming and intoxicating all at once. As he navigated the familiar streets leading to his apartment, a new worry began to gnaw at him. What if one of his neighbors saw him? The thought of trying to explain his current appearance made his stomach churn. He pulled into the parking garage with a sigh of relief, choosing a spot in a dark corner far from the elevator. For a long moment, Jordan simply sat in the car, gathering his courage. He could do this. Just a quick dash to his apartment and he'd be safe. Taking a deep breath, Jordan grabbed his shopping bags and eased out of the car. The click of his heels echoed in the cavernous space as he hurried towards the elevator. He jabbed the up button repeatedly, glancing nervously over his shoulder. The doors slid open with a cheerful ding, and Jordan rushed inside, jabbing the button for his floor. As the elevator began to rise, he caught sight of his reflection in the mirrored walls. The woman staring back at him still seemed like a stranger, beautiful and poised. It was hard to believe it was really him beneath the makeup and feminine clothes. The elevator came to a stop, and Jordan peeked out cautiously. The hallway was mercifully empty. He hurried to his apartment door, fumbling with his keys. Just as he was about to slip inside, a door opened further down the hall. "Oh, hello there." Jordan froze, 1 foot over the threshold. He turned slowly to see Mrs. Abernathy, his elderly neighbor, smiling at him from her doorway. "I don't believe we've met," she continued. "Are you visiting someone?" For a split second, Jordan considered making a run for it, but years of ingrained politeness won out. He cleared his throat, pitching his voice higher. "Oh, yes, I'm Sarah, Jordan's cousin, just dropping some things off for him." Mrs. Abernathy's face lit up. "How lovely! Jordan's such a nice young man. It's wonderful he has family in the area. Will you be staying long?" Jordan shook his head, desperately willing the conversation to end. "No, I'm afraid I can't. Just a quick visit." "Well, it was nice to meet you, Sarah. Do tell Jordan I said hello." With a wave, Mrs. Abernathy disappeared back into her apartment. Jordan sagged against the doorframe, heart pounding. That had been too close. He stumbled into his apartment, locking the door behind him. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. He'd made it. He was home safe. Jordan kicked off the pinching heels with a groan of relief, wiggling his toes against the carpet. He made his way to the bedroom, shopping bags swinging at his side. As he set the bags down on the bed, reality began to sink in. What was he supposed to do now? He couldn't exactly go about his normal routine dressed like this, but the thought of changing back into his male clothes made his chest ache with loss. Jordan caught sight of himself in the full-length mirror on his closet door. The woman reflected. There looked so natural, so right. This was who he was meant to be, who he'd always been inside. With trembling hands, he reached up and unclasped the pearl necklace. He set it gently on the dresser, followed by the bangles and earrings. Slowly, methodically, he removed each piece of his feminine costume. But when it came time to change out of the skirt and blouse, Jordan hesitated. He ran his hands over the silky fabric, relishing the sensation against his skin. Maybe he could keep them on just a little longer. Decision made, Jordan padded to the kitchen to pour himself a much-needed glass of wine. The events of the day swirled in his mind as he sipped the crisp white liquid. He'd taken an enormous step today, one he'd only dreamed about for years. What did it mean for his future? Could he find a way to incorporate this part of himself into his everyday life? Or would it remain a secret indulgence, hidden away from the world? Jordan didn't have the answers, but for now, he was content to simply bask in the afterglow of his adventure. He'd worry about the future tomorrow. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in vibrant hues, Jordan curled up on the couch with his wine. The skirt fanned out around his legs, a tangible reminder of the incredible day he'd had. For the first time in his life, he felt truly, completely himself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Jordan knew he could face them. He'd found a strength within himself he never knew existed, and he wasn't about to let it go. The pleasant buzz of the wine mingled with lingering adrenaline, leaving Jordan feeling simultaneously wired and relaxed. He found himself unable to sit still, pacing the length of his small apartment. With each step, the swish of the skirt around his legs sent a thrill through him. He paused in front of the hall mirror, studying his reflection. The makeup was slightly smudged now, his hair mussed from running his hands through it. But, even disheveled, the woman staring back at him looked more natural than his male persona ever had. A sudden urge seized him. He needed, to document this moment, to capture this version of himself before he lost his nerve and changed back into Jordan. With trembling hands, he retrieved his phone from where he'd tossed it on the coffee table. He opened the camera app, hesitating for just a moment before switching it to selfie mode. The image on the screen took his breath away. Was that really him? The soft curve of his cheek, the fullness of his painted lips, the delicate line of his collarbone peeking out from the blouse's neckline. It all came together to create a stunningly feminine picture. Jordan began snapping photos, twisting this way and that to capture different angles. He lifted the hem of the skirt playfully, showing a glimpse of thigh above his stockings. He pouted at the camera, then broke into a radiant smile. With each click of the shutter, he felt his confidence growing. This was him, the real him. And he looked amazing. Eventually, Jordan set the phone aside, flopping onto the couch with a contented sigh. He scrolled through the photos, marveling at how natural he looked in feminine attire. It was as if he'd finally stepped into the skin he was always meant to inhabit. As the initial rush of excitement began to fade, new worries crept in. What was he supposed to do with these photos? He couldn't exactly post them on social media or show them to friends. The idea of anyone discovering his secret sent a jolt of panic through him, but he couldn't bring himself to delete them either. They were proof that this afternoon hadn't been just a dream or flight of fancy. This version of himself was real, tangible. In the end, Jordan created a secure folder on his phone, hidden behind a passcode. He carefully transferred the photos, along with a few choice shots from the department store changing room, his own private collection of memories from this incredible day. With that taken care of, Jordan found himself at loose ends. It was growing late, but he wasn't ready to end this magical experience just yet. He poured another glass of wine and wandered out onto his small balcony. The cool night air raised goosebumps on his arms as he leaned against the railing. The city stretched out before him, a glittering tapestry of lights. Somewhere out there, he mused, there had to be others like him. People who understood the exhilaration and fear of embracing their true selves. The thought was both comforting and lonely. Jordan sipped his wine, lost in contemplation. How many times had he stood on this very balcony, gazing out at the world and feeling like an outsider? But tonight was different. Tonight, he felt like he finally belonged in his own skin. A burst of laughter from the street below startled him from his reverie. A group of young women stumbled past, clearly on their way to a night out. Jordan watched them with a mixture of envy and longing. Would he ever have the courage to go out in public like this again? To fully embrace this part of himself? He didn't have the answers, but for the first time, the possibility didn't seem quite so out of reach. As the night wore on, exhaustion began to set in. The events of the day caught up with Jordan all at once, leaving him feeling drained, but oddly peaceful. He made his way to the bedroom, pausing in front of the mirror one last time. With gentle hands, he removed the last vestiges of his feminine persona. He wiped away the smudged makeup, carefully hung up the blouse and skirt. But as he reached for his usual pajamas, Jordan hesitated. Instead, he pulled out the silky nightgown he'd impulsively purchased weeks ago, but never had the courage to wear. The material whispered against his skin as he slipped it on, falling to mid-thigh in a cascade of pale blue. Jordan climbed into bed, relishing the feeling of the cool sheets against his bare legs. As he drifted off to sleep, images from the day played through his mind like a beautiful dream. Only this time, he knew he wouldn't have to wake up.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!